So I was interested in kind of international political issues as an undergraduate student. I majored in international development and Russian. I pursued a master's degree in Russian studies, and at that time it was kind of 9/11, post 9/11 period, and there were some major shifts happening, and the United States became very involved in Central Asia, the countries neighboring Afghanistan. So during the course of my master's degree, I studied Central Asia quite intensively, but then things changed and the US really disengaged from Central Asia. So I went through this period of, do I go to law school? Do I, pursue a PhD? And ultimately went on to pursue a PhD in international relations. And I had a very kind of typical trajectory for an academic. I went to graduate school, I had some postgraduate opportunities, I became a professor, and it was during the course of that evolution, I would say, that I became much more interested in what was happening on the ground in real life than I was necessarily with the theories that people were debating, or the kind of methods of analysis and experimentation that have really become the focus of political science right now. So for me, I'm still growing into that role, but it very much started from my research interests and moved outward from there.
So I'd like to think that my instinct for this field started at birth. I have 3 brothers and no sisters, so I'm sort of a self-disciplined person, and I came home in high school. This is pre-9/11. One day, and I was like, Mom, I'm going to join the Army, and it's going to start with this high school ROTC program. And she was like, no, you're not. So we go in the next day, she sits down with this guy, and he's like, she's not doing this. And he was like, sorry, but she is. So then I went to college, a private university, and then was going through my Army ROTC training, and I had a run-in with an anthill. We were doing like physical training on the ground, and it was dark, and I feel these things on my neck, and I'm freaking out, and I'm running off to the bathroom, and people are screaming my name, and long story short, I ended up in ICU for 3 days because I had an anaphylactic reaction. So that ended my Army career pretty quickly. So I said, well, what am I going to do now? Because that was my job after graduation. And by the way, was that time it was very uncool to be a girl wanting to do these sorts of things. So I said, well, I'm going to go work at the Pentagon. We have this great system, civilian control over the military. If I can't join, then I'll go work there. So I started grad school, started working, and my first day at the Pentagon was 9/11. And so of course that will shape and inform your worldview and your career after that. But it was some of the most remarkable work I've ever done for those 2.5 years following that in the Defense Department at the most senior levels. Not me, but working with people at those levels. And my last rotation at DoD was on Capitol Hill. And I realized, whoa, we have these 2 branches of the government that have no idea how to talk to each other, and it's a big problem because they all care about security. And so then I said, well, I'm going to take a stint on the Hill, and now I work here where I actually keep a foot in both camps. So I spend a lot of my time with executive branch leadership in Capitol Hill.
I'm completing a book on U.S. foreign aid and its impact in recipient countries. So a lot of that is, writing, editing, kind of typical work that you would do in high school or college as well. But then in this world, it's a little bit different because I don't have students, right? I don't have teaching responsibilities. And so it's actually been really liberating to have the opportunity to come here and do more in-depth research, to talk to colleagues who have experience interacting with government, interfacing with different groups, and to think about how I can best craft a project that's going to be useful to the general public, to policymakers, and also to fellow scholars.
Yeah, it's a really good question. If I had to crudely sum it up, I spend about 1/3 of my time on research and publication and writing to sort of build up my portfolio. So giving my hot take on issues of defense budget and strategy. About 1/3 interacting with members of the media, right? Because they're a primary resource for me to reach a wider audience. Typically print, since I'd say depending on my own calculation, has at least 60 or so defense beat reporters at least. I know most of them, and we spend a lot of time talking. But occasional TV, radio, that sort of thing. And then another 1/3 sort of with senior leadership, right? So on the Hill and at DOD. So last week I spent time with a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, one of the members at a private event, and then like the week before, we hosted a dinner here at AEI for 8 members of the House Armed Services Committee. And so that's our job is to constantly be talking and interacting with them, usually behind the scenes. It's not on the stage here at an event, although we do that too. But I think our most impactful work is a long, slow process of educating them, convincing them of the arguments, and that takes time. It takes time to build the relationship and then to build the arguments. And you have to be receptive to their questions. And so I often joke that half the things I write are only because like 5 members of Congress have asked me the same question. They all think that they're the first one to ask me. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to write it, or in this case, the new writing, which is called tweetstorming.
I think that the kind of Israel-Palestine conflict and all the associated peace agreements and peace negotiations show the powerful use of foreign aid as a diplomatic tool, right? That aid has been used effectively as an incentive to get parties on board and to make sure that they stay committed to the agreements that have been made. And so, while I think that, there are obviously a wide range of countries that benefit from the use of foreign assistance as a diplomatic tool, but at least in that instance, it really has shown that we can get serious commitments on the ground through the use of this tool. But more generally, we've also seen huge fluctuations in foreign aid to the Middle East as a result of some of the surrounding conflicts, and I think that is going to continue, that we have partners and allies that we're able to provide kind of stable streams of assistance to, but we'll see fluctuations as well, and those will ultimately affect dynamics in the region.
So from my perspective, foreign aid, it often has a strong, heavy military component, right? So we want them to buy platforms and weapon systems that we manufacture, partly because it's good for our industrial base, disputable, but also because it's just easier. So when we go out there and we do something together in Afghanistan or wherever, if we all sort of are running on the same common systems, it's a lot easier to fight together and to be more effective in that fight. Everyone flies F-16s, or F-35s or whatever it is. It just makes it a little easier and to be more successful more quickly. But there's another element to this. For example, Iron Dome is one of the most well-known capabilities that we've helped co-develop with Israel. And now all of a sudden you hear people say we need an Iron Dome for South Korea. Mm-hmm. Completely not applicable and not what the threat, it doesn't solve any problems that are helpful to South Korea. But you get a sense of people's awareness of how helpful that has been for stability for one of our closest allies in the region. But there's this other component, which is when simmering conflicts heat up, foreign aid and that trust and that relationship and that diplomacy, you can't build that overnight. General Petraeus used to talk about this a lot. And so, but what do you need when you need to move troops in and around places to make problems stop and go away? You need things like overflying access, and you need access to ports and bases to put ships and people and get them to wherever they need to go. And we don't talk about it, but that's an impact and effect of foreign aid. And we find out the hard way when Turkey or some other good friend, when they shut down their airspace, and then we have to divert more tankers over here because they can't go fly from A to B. They have to go from A to B to C to get to D. And that's not that we don't have the resources or the time to do that in many cases. So these are some of the effects I think that have helped, and our regional allies in the Middle East in particular. Right. Yeah, we have a lot of political problems that are now translating into military effectiveness problems. There's no doubt about that. Congress's inability to pass budgets on time and then to freeze them until they can get to that point does unique damage to the Defense Department. So of course it's the largest federal agency. It's larger than all federal agencies combined. It's actually the largest organization on the planet. We think it's Google or Alibaba or Facebook or something, but it's not. It's the Department of Defense, for better or worse, which is partly why it's so expensive.
Yeah.
They buy $350 to $400 billion worth of goods and services with their 600 some billion we give them as taxpayers every year, and then 400 goes back out the door. So when you freeze spending, they basically stop buying, and it just creates all kinds of horrible effects. So that's sort of the top line issue and the political challenges. But below that, yeah, there's no doubt we have to reprioritize spending. So I know an interest area of yours is the nuclear triad. So the recapitalization of that triad, basically replacing all the old stuff and making it new. Each leg of that, it has to be, the time is now to replace it. So we've extended the life of the submarine boomers and the Minuteman missiles as long as we possibly can. So unfortunately, that time is here, and we're not going to move to a diet. So if you're going to have a triad, it's useless in terms of deterring other countries unless you can show and demonstrate that it's credible, it's safe, it's effective, and it works, and you can use it if you need it. That is a huge $250 billion over its lifetime tab that's going to come due. There is not enough new money coming in even under President Trump to cover that in particular. So that's just one example of the types of sort of shifts underneath the top line that have to take place. Base closures and other efficiencies, that's a whole other basket as well that isn't getting done but needs to.
I think that there is a strong commitment that goes back, to the very foundation of America, that looks at what it stands for, right? And so if we're a nation that stands for freedom and liberty, right, in defense of democracy and support of kind of human development and human freedom around the world, it means that you have to make hard choices about how you engage with the world, right? And so we have chosen as a nation, right, to engage in humanitarian assistance, to engage in foreign assistance, to help countries build free market, economically robust systems that will kind of enhance human betterment and human development. And I think that requires serious resources. But those are decisions that we have to make about what sort of nation we want to be and how we want to pursue kind of the betterment of all mankind.
That's right. So we do it because it's the right thing to do, and we should continue to do that. And it's part of our belief system and philosophy as a country, but we also do it for naked self-interest, right? Economic, fundamentally. We want a global growing economy, and it supports ours, which is one of the largest, of course, in the world, and it keeps everything humming along, right? You can't afford all these tools of power unless you have an economy that's growing, even the military. So it's hugely important. There's been, in my world this week, there's been all kinds of people rightfully upset that we had U.S. military forces in Haiti within hours after their humanitarian disaster a couple years ago, and it's been 2 weeks and Puerto Rico's struggling with just a modest number of troops, and that's actually a totally fair criticism. But more broadly than that, I think back to the Japan nuclear disaster, right? Tsunamis in India and elsewhere. We're usually the first in and the last to leave, and we bring the most number of people with the best skills. And that's important to demonstrate our commitment to our friendship with so many of these countries and our goodwill. So, right, if we want to promote our beliefs and project them to the world, it's best to show it through deed, not word. And that's one of the ways that we do that. And I think I see no reason why we wouldn't want to.
Yeah.